from the heart of rural France. This is the Keto Woman podcast, brought to you by me. Hello Keto lovelies, I'm Daisy Brackenhall, and I've spent most of my life struggling with my weight and confidence, and have always had a difficult relationship with food. Even when I finally got to my target weight, after weight loss surgery and eating low carb, I couldn't maintain it and I was miserable. I've been keto now for over 2 years, and it has given me the freedom to fall in love with food again, without the constant gain, loss, guilt, virtue cycle of before. Health and happiness is where it's at now, running on fat. Welcome to the Keto Woman podcast. Each week I'll be chatting to inspirational women, maybe even the odd man, to discover the secrets to their success so that I can share them with you. So what is keto? Keto is a way of eating that enables you to switch your body's main fuel source from sugar to fat. Who doesn't want to be a fat burner, right? But how do we achieve this? A great place to start is by keeping carbs under 20 grams a day. So things like leafy greens and above ground vegetables, plus some nuts and seeds and the incidental carbs you find in things like full fat dairy. Choose delicious fatty proteins and be free and easy with oily dressings on salad and butter on your veggies. Once you're in the swing of things, you can tweak it to suit you. Make your own personalized keto. You'll hear all sorts of ways to keto from my guests. There is no one way to do keto, no one size fits all. I hope to show you just how flexible and fabulous this way of eating can be. I'm not a doctor, and most of my guests won't be either, so we really can't give you medical advice. It's always best to consult your own doctor when making big changes to your diet and lifestyle, because they know you and your medical history, and so have access to the bigger picture. Wouldn't it be helpful to have one place where you could find all the links? Want to sign up to my new Patreon exclusive Facebook group, Daisy's Lovelies? No problem. How about subscribing to my YouTube channel? Please help me notch up my first 1,000 subscribers by going to links.ketowomanpodcast.com and following the YouTube link. Not following me on Instagram yet? Hit the Instagram button. You get the idea. All the buttons, all the links you need are at links.ketowomanpodcast.com. Thank you for tuning in to episode number 145. Sawubona. That is a rather wonderful Zulu greeting that goes beyond a simple hello. It means I see you, we see you, the we being the tribe, the ancestors, a spiritual unity type we. I see you, I acknowledge you, I recognize you. Sawubona. You'll see why I decided to lead with that when you dive into this week's episode with extraordinary woman, Sharon Nobuhle Williams. Nobuhle has been a licensed evangelist since 2003 through the Pentecostal Assemblies of the World and founder of Global Growth Ministries, an organization dedicated to spiritual growth and development. Her fourth journey to South Africa resulted in a 6-year stay there as a missionary with pastoral oversight, which gave GGM a global presence. She holds an MBA in Management Information Systems, along with over 20 years of progressive business experience, primarily in the telecommunications industry. After her diagnosis in December 2018 of stage 4 lipedema with a component of lymphedema, Nobuhle sought traditional treatment which began in mid-March 2019. It initially consisted of MLD, wrapping and low-carb eating. Within just 2 weeks she noticed that her pain had all but diminished. After becoming a part of the masterclass, hosted by Lipedema Simplified, she switched to a keto way of eating, began swimming, using a pneumatic pump, and 90 pounds lighter, Nobuhle has and still is in the process of collecting a small arsenal of tips, tricks and hacks to help further her goal of living a physically fit and healthy lifestyle. Thank you to Mendy and Rayanne for putting me in touch with Nobuhle, because it was a delight to spend time with her. I hope you all enjoy listening every bit as much as I enjoyed recording. Welcome, Nobuhle, to the Keto Woman podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm great, thank you. How are you?
I'm very good. We're top and tailing again. Well, it's morning for both of us, but it's approaching dawn for you. So you're a very, very late night person. You're truly nocturnal.
I've been born and raised nocturnal, I tell you. I think it's genetic.
I don't meet many people who are truly nocturnal through choice. You know, some people do it because they work night shifts or something. And I can remember listening to, I'm trying to remember his name. Is it Matthew Wilson? The guy who writes a lot about sleep anyway. And he maintains that there's actually not a huge difference between night owls and early birds, that there's only actually a difference of about an hour or so. But you absolutely disprove that.
Totally.
You're full on nocturnal.
Absolutely. I'll tell you, I was 16 months old, and at the age of 16 months old, I was diagnosed with all my skin fell off. Okay.
Wow.
So they put me in a hospital and they diagnosed me with Stevens-Johnson syndrome, which now is kind of common because of all of the drugs that flooded the market, but it was an extremely rare disease back then. So I was in quarantine in a hospital for I guess a week or so. And my mother said, I drove those night nurses crazy because I slept all day and wanted to play all night. And I was one of those kids that had to have your undivided attention. You look at me, you give me all the attention. Yeah. So it's been my whole life. I've been pretty darn nocturnal.
Interesting. Yeah. So what was that? Tell me a bit more about that syndrome. That sounds incredible. All your skin falls off. What?
You know what? And my mother said I look like a slab of meat.
Wow.
And it started with me looking in the mirror one day. She said I used to love to look at myself in the mirror. And I'm a toddler, you know, and literally a piece of skin had fallen off my face.
Wow.
And then I took a rag and I put it on the mirror to cover the mirror so that I wouldn't see it and I wouldn't show my mom. She took me to the doctor. The doctor put me on antibiotics thinking maybe it was from some kind of a rash or something, you know. And then we were at the movie theater or something and another piece of skin fell off. And then she took me back and then it just all started falling.
Wow.
And when they diagnosed me at the time, it was like 1 per million people got it. 50% of the people who died. 90% who lived went blind. And I was the only person that was nearsighted in my family. The only person that had to wear glasses. And everybody wondered, I wonder if that could have something to do with it. Mm. And it wasn't until I was in about the 7th grade that a baseball player had died from it.
Wow.
That was the second time. In the 90s, the FDA started flooding the market with various drugs, you know, just approving everything. And then it became the side effect. So a lot of older people were starting to get it. And I did know of an old man, and he started getting really bad blisters on his hands and stuff, and they diagnosed him with that. And it was because of some of the medicines that they had been prescribing him. So, yeah, interesting journey.
And is it just something that can affect anyone, or does it tend to go with certain existing conditions? Or
well, when I first got it, no, what's happening now, it's all side effects from drugs, from certain types of drugs. But I believe they really didn't understand a lot about it at all when I had it. And this was back in the early 60s. I was born in 62. So this was in 63, you know, so I'm sure there was and my dad's approach was, let's find the best dermatologists and ophthalmologists in the city so that we can try to make sure that whatever she needs, I had a good dad, you know, whatever she needs, we're going to make sure that we cover it, because he was very, very concerned. So fortunately, I did get great care then. But again, it was one of those things, because it was extremely rare. Most research and stuff isn't done on the more rare things, especially back in those days. So they put me in quarantine. I remember they said that they had me drinking. I mean, I lived off Sprite or some kind of soda pop or whatever, but I really wasn't hardly eating anything, I think. And I don't know if that's all experimental, so they can find out, is it food related or what? I wouldn't know. I really wouldn't know. So it is definitely treatable, though. And for most people who get it today, it's a matter of taking them off the medicine that's causing it.
Fascinating.
Story number 1.
So where to start? I think I think the thing I want to find out more about first, we did some practice before we started in how to pronounce your name. I have a thing about, I know a lot of people, they don't mind if you get your name wrong, but I like to at least attempt to get the pronunciation of people's names right. But yours has a particularly interesting story. So I'd really like to hear the story behind it.
Okay. So I lived in South Africa for 6 years. And actually I had stayed there a couple of times before. I was there for a month at one point. I was there for 3 months at one point, and then I lived there for 6 years. So way back when, I was given the name Nobuhle Sibusiso. Nobuhle is phonetically pronounced exactly as you see the letters, which means don't ignore the H. It needs to be pronounced. Nobuhle. And all you're doing is just blowing that H out while you're saying the L. Nobuhle. It's as simple as that. The story behind how I use that today, it's mostly in the lipedema community. I'm very well known by that name because when I was diagnosed with lipedema, or when I was looking into it and I was doing research on it, I decided to join some of the lipedema groups on Facebook. And anytime I do anything with organizations or people or groups that I don't know, I shift into incognito mode. Well, that used to be my incognito name. But unbeknownst to me, I actually had to put Nobuhle into my name, which is Sharon Williams. So on Facebook, I'm found as Sharon Nobuhle Williams because I'm no longer incognito. I'm kind of exposed. So now it's just no big deal. And since the lipedema community became very aware of me through the master classes, even before I joined their Facebook groups, I had to actually put the name in there so that people who wanted to find me that were a part of our group could actually find me. So, but yes, that was.
You had to merge it.
I had to merge it. Yes.
So tell me a little bit about why, how come you were given a name? What, it sounds like there's a story behind that.
Well, usually, they're very, how do I describe this? When they really accept you into their community and into their tribe, into their. Because
you were saying it's a Zulu community. Is that right?
Well, yeah. Well, okay. There are 13 official languages in South Africa because there are way more than 13 groups out there. Yeah. But those are the main languages. And I stayed amongst Zulus, Sutus, Tswanas, Xhosas, Vendas. Fortunately, I don't have that many names. I was only given Zulu. I'm a minister, and I was actually out there as a missionary. And the first time that I was out there, the pastor that was hosting me is the one that gave me the name Nobuhle. Right. That's the Zulu name. And Sutu is more what we were talking about before, more of the guttural, it's Mabuhle or Mabuhle, I think I'm pronouncing it right. But no one's ever used the Sutu name, even though the first family that I stayed with was a Sutu family. Then when I lived there for 4 years, I lived amongst all Tswanas, predominantly a Tswana. It's in the northwest region, which is not very far from Botswana. So that's mostly the language. But they were content. As a matter of fact, I rarely shared the name when I was out there until I kind of got schooled. No, you share that because that's a sign of your being. You are basically a part of the family. You're one of us. And so that's how I was received as. And so I learned to really embrace the name, and it's a beautiful name. It literally means beautiful. So, and Sibusiso means blessings. And so I'm beautifully blessed is how I look at it. So yeah, there's the story behind the name Nobuhle.
That's wonderful. I love it.
Thank you.
It's fabulous to have a story behind your name. Great way to start. So where to start with your journey? You've already mentioned that now that very much includes being part of the lipedema community, but perhaps we could go back go back to whenever things not really started to go wrong is the wrong word. But what happened in your life? What led you to having to make the changes that you're making now?
Interestingly, my story really began as my health journey. I will put it that way. It really began right when I came back from South Africa. Even when I was there, I forgot about that. I injured my back one day and had to go to the hospital. They gave me a beautiful shot in the butt. I don't know if that's the appropriate way to put it, but it made me feel so much better. But meanwhile, they decided to take x-rays of my back. I'm sorry, I moved when I said that. I'm not going to move anymore, I promise.
I've been telling her off because she's got a squeaky chair.
I have a very disobedient chair. I should try to adjust it some other way where I can't move. But anyway, while I was at the hospital, they took x-rays. And they didn't explain to me why. And remember, I'm in a third world country, so everything is a lot different than the usual. And then I was told they want to do an MRI. They never explained why. They did say that, like, bones at the base of my neck, at one point, they're like infused together practically. But they didn't go into detail as to why are they doing all this. And I thought, well, if they want to check it out, I'll let them see what they can find. Well, to get an MRI meant to show up at 6:30 in the morning at the hospital to find out. Oh, well, first I had to show up at 6:30 to wait in a long line so that they can give me the prescription for the thing. And then I come back another day at 6:30 in the morning to wait for the vehicle to drive me 2.5 hours because they only have one MRI machine per province.
Wow. Yeah.
And I waited patiently for that ride that never came because the machine broke. At that point, I thought, oh, forget it. I'll just keep going. And if it's meant for me to know, thanks be to God, I did not find out there because that would have not been a good thing to go through. So now I'm going to fast forward. I got back to the United States and I knew something was wrong. I even questioned how would I be able to work a job because literally the last year that I was there, I did very little. Right. And in my mind, I couldn't put two and two together of how could I do any of this? You know, how can I survive when I get home, basically? Well, it took 1.5 years for all of a sudden everything to come to the boil to explode, so to speak. One day I had a very, very bad pain in my left foot. Well, it wasn't one day. It was progressing over a couple of days, but it would only happen when it was time for me to go to sleep. I would go lay down. And as soon as I would doze off, I would get these horrible stabbing pains in my feet, in my one foot. And I remember going to the emergency room and the doctor blew me off. All he wanted to offer me was a boot. That's all. You know, he just really blew me off. I remember going home thinking, how am I going to survive? And I think it was like 6 days later when it got to the point where one night I have on socks, but all of a sudden my left foot gets cold. Actually, my left toe gets cold. So instead of checking it because I was busy, common sense forgot to tell me to check it. So I just put another sock on it and kept being busy doing what I was doing. And then it still got colder and colder. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this is ridiculous. So I took a blanket and strapped it around the feet so that I could continue to do what I'm doing. And then it got to the point where, okay, something's wrong. Let me look at this foot. My big toe was completely blue. Wow. And I'm thinking, oh my God, what am I going to do? And it was just like 9 or 10 o'clock at night. I decided to take some warm water, soak my feet in water. In hindsight, I learned those are probably not the things you should do, but this is what I did. The color did came back, although it was hell. It was probably like the equivalent of putting frostbite hands into warm water. You know, it was really horrible. That night I laid down. I told myself, I am not going to go to the emergency room. The pain was unbearable. But I said, I'm going to wait until urgent care wakes up and then go. That's what I did. I went to urgent care. The doctor, when I told him what happened, he immediately did what the previous doctor did not do, which was check for a pulse. Right. And I didn't know what he was doing, but he was doing his finger some weird way on my feet. I'm thinking, okay. And then he just said, I'm sending you to the emergency room. I complained. I just was at the emergency room and they blew me off. And he asked me what hospital. I told him. He said, I'm sending you to this other one. They were waiting on me when I got there. They rushed me back, took x-rays, found a blood clot in my groin, and then kept me in the hospital for 4 days trying to find out why in the world are you as young as you are. At that time, I was 54. Why are you so young getting blood clots? You're young and you're healthy and you don't smoke, you don't drink, and you don't have diabetes. You don't have all these. Why are you having this? And so they were steady doing a lot of tests and what have you. And then eventually, after about 4 days of total confusion, they released me and transferred me to an oncologist. But I want to note, on the second day that I was there, the day after I got admitted, one of the doctors asked me, "Are your legs always this big?" And I'm just thinking I'm just fat because I've always had weight issues. And in my mind, my legs are just big because I'm just fat, And so I was like, no, I'm just fat. I just blew it off. So there was the sign that it was there and in full effect then. But looking into that diagnosis and trying to find out what was going on comes later. After 4 days, I got released and got transferred to the oncology department because I did meet the hematologist while I was there. And he diagnosed me on his own with multiple myeloma, which is a relatively rare blood cancer. Myeloma blood cells are protein cells that basically go rogue. And in a lot of cases, they attack your bones. And so people with multiple myeloma tend to often have lytic lesions, which are lesions that in an X-ray look like Swiss cheese. In my case, because they couldn't understand while I was in the hospital, the one doctor asked, "Why do you have all these lesions on your bones?" And I'm looking at her like, "Well, you have to tell me because I've never seen them before, And so I don't know what you're talking about." So released me and then had me go through some different labs and tests and came back with, okay, you definitely have myeloma. He said that he was struggling with diagnosing me with that because of I didn't have a high enough number of myeloma cells to call it that. There's another thing called MGUS, which is monoclonal gammopathy of undetermined something or other. And that's when you're like on the verge of becoming a myeloma patient, I guess.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But in this particular case, they decided because of the amount of lesions, we'll just call it that. And so I went into chemo for about 5 months, and changed doctors. And I switched to a myeloma specialist. When I switched to him, the first thing he did was take me off of chemo because I was on chemo too long. To collect stem cells, they don't want to damage your stem cells by too much chemo. So they took me off of chemo and collected the stem cells. And then he put me back on chemo, but I think I only got one more round after that because I was throwing up and having side effects that I guess he just decided, maybe let's just leave it or what have you. As it turns out, this was a misdiagnosis. I went to a cancer support group meeting, a myeloma support group meeting, and the doctor was talking about lytic lesions. And when I told them, I said, well, they found sclerotic lesions on my bones. He gave me a strange look and said, that's extremely rare, and changed the subject. So I Googled what causes sclerotic lesions, and POEMS syndrome pops up.
What's the difference between those two lesions?
Good question. Sclerotic lesions are like growths on your bones, as opposed to holes.
Right.
So instead of eating holes in your bones, it's like calcium deposits or something that forms growths on your bones.
Oh, but does it kind of show up as the same on X-ray then?
No. When you see lytic lesions, they look like Swiss cheese.
Oh, right. But yours didn't look like that.
No. Mine, you'll see the bone and you'll see lumps. You'll see.
I see.
Yeah. So it's more of a growth as opposed to something eating in it.
Gotcha.
But in both cases, they cause damage. POEMS syndrome is also called sclerotic I think they call it sclerotic myeloma or something along those lines. It's questionable. It depends on who you ask, whether or not it falls under the cancer category. But POEM syndrome is a multi-system disorder. So each letter, it's an acronym. POEMS is actually an acronym. The P is for polyneuropathy, which we did find out subsequently that, yes, she's got a certain type of neuropathy. She qualifies for that. The O stands for organology. I think I'm saying that right, but that means enlarged organs. Fortunately, I don't have that. The E stands for endocrine problems. I was diagnosed after the fact with hyperthyroidism and Graves' disease, which I thought was quite amazing. I'm like, as big as I am, I would have the thyroid of somebody that can eat everything and still be skinny. It's like, that's not fair. I want that skinny part of it, but that's neither here nor there. And the M stands for monoclonal gammopathy, which is the myeloma cells,
right?
Which, of course, I had that. And the S stands for skin changes, which don't really have too many skin changes, but one of the other key features of POEM syndrome is the sclerotic lesions. Also, arterial blood clots is a feature of it. And it's an extreme...
tick pretty well all the boxes then.
Almost, yes. The way that they rate you is you have to meet, I think, 3 of those criteria. I can't remember how many or what have you.
Right.
But I definitely checked enough boxes were okay. And there is a growth factor called VEGF that they do labs on. And that's like one of the first things that they would do. The problem is they didn't start looking for this on me until after I've been on chemo so long that those growth factors were probably already suppressed. Although when he first took the test, the numbers came out high. If your numbers are 100, higher than 100, they say, oh, there's a good chance you got POEM syndrome. If your numbers are 200 or higher, they say you definitely have POEM syndrome. And the first test that they did, it came up 300 and something. But they took the same blood and redid it again, and then it was below 100. It was like kind of weird. So that kind of put everything questionable. But the doctor just concluded, no, this is definitely, we're re-diagnosing you. The difference in the treatment is reversed. So for myeloma, they would give you the chemo first, to get rid of as many of the myeloma cells as they can, because there are so many myeloma cells usually. And then from there, you go to transplant, stem cell transplant. Well, with POEM syndrome, if you don't have a lot of myeloma cells to start with, they can just take you into transplant, because when they take you into transplant, the first thing they do is do a blast of chemo to kill out everything in your bone marrow. So whatever myeloma cells are being produced, they would just get nuked right then. And then you don't have to worry about chemo afterwards usually. They would only do it the way that they did me if they know it's POEM syndrome and you don't really qualify for transplant. So it's like, in my case, they put the cart before the horse. The good news is everything was suppressed and brought under subjection. The myeloma cells, died all off, and all of my labs and stuff have been fine ever since then. But what ended up happening after that was I started going to the gym, and they had a cancer wellness program in there that if you've been on chemo or off of chemo within a year, you can join. And this was just at the cusp of that I joined. And it's an exercise program that they do to try to keep people moving, because that's better for you. And it was during that time when I realized something is dreadfully wrong, because my legs started feeling like bowling balls. I could literally, how if you just try to lift your foot up off the ground, I could probably lift it up maybe 3 inches. I was falling over my feet, just to lift it up 3 inches. It felt like I was literally, somebody had took a millstone and attached it to my feet. My legs just got that heavy. And I started noticing, and I kept going to my PCP asking about these fat pads. I didn't know that they were called fat pads. I'm like, I'm swollen here. What is this? And it was in my, below my knees and in my ankles where I started really noticing it. Sure enough, the doctor just did what doctors usually do with lipedema patients. They blow you off, and just the anti-fat bias triggers in, and, you just, stop eating, I was very, very frustrated. And ultimately, a physical therapist was doing a teaching there at the same gym that I attend. It's a medical facility as well there. And she was talking about lymphedema. And I asked her to look at my feet and my legs. I said, what do you see after the training? And she said, you know what? She asked me a few questions like, do you struggle losing weight? Have you always been shaped like you are? And that is small up top and big at the bottom. Yes, yes. And she asked me a couple more questions. She said, when you go home, look up lipedema. She said, because you are like a textbook case for lipedema. And I went home, and that's how I found Catherine Seo, and I found the Lipedema Project. Mm-hmm. And then I watched the disease they called fat, and the whole time I was jaw dropped because it's like everything I'm reading, everything I'm seeing was describing me to the letter. Then there was the challenge of getting diagnosed. I had to drive 4 hours just to get to a doctor to give me a proper diagnosis. And with that diagnosis, the one thing that he said that most people have success with, he said, you need to get on an anti-inflammatory diet. And he said, a lot of people do good with keto. I'm thinking, I don't know what keto is. I don't know if I'm interested in giving up my fruits. You know, I was kind of, had a serious fruit addiction, I tell you. And then I joined the master class that was offered through the Lipedema Simplified. And they're really keto focused there. And so, strict keto, which is excellent for any kind of, seems like almost any kind of chronic illness. Anything dealing with inflammation, keto is just like the way to go to get that inflammation down. I started low carb because I've been saying all along, I'm going to go low carb. I didn't even know what that meant. So I ended up going low carb, but I was still having, my nice big healthy bowl of oatmeal, with my brown sugar. I thought I was doing good. But the good news is within a couple of weeks, as I started learning this is carbs, I started ditching them one at a time. I just started kind of, I got rid of the pastas. I got rid of the potatoes. I literally, they went bad in the fridge because I just stopped eating them. With, the sugars, I just kind of got rid of. And
in some ways, I think it's quite good to do it that way. I mean, you did it accidentally that way, bit by bit. But I think it really depends a lot on your personality and how you like approaching these things. But you can certainly get rid of probably a lot of those, the keto flu, the carb withdrawal that people often go through in the first week or so when you're dramatically changing. But most likely you're going to avoid that by ditching one thing at a time. Exactly. And it really kind of depends on your personality and your relationship with food as to what suits you best. But for some people, just taking one thing out at a time is a much easier way to get there than going, full force, all or nothing, all at once.
Absolutely. And it's funny that you say that because I knew what I thought carbs was. I knew getting rid of the potatoes, getting rid of the pastas, and getting rid of the sugars. Those were like the three big things. But I didn't get rid of legumes. I didn't get rid of fruit immediately. So I was still having, I bought a scale. That's what really kind of got me into things. I bought a food scale and I installed a carb app. And I started weighing and measuring everything. That's the only reason I knew how many carbs I was consuming. My goal was to get under 200 calories. I mean, not calories, carbs. That was my goal. To me, that was a point of celebration. But you're absolutely right. I'm sure the reason I didn't have keto food, because I think I had done this for it was a good 3 months, at least 3 months before I actually accidentally slid into keto. But what ended up happening is the cravings went away. So the fruit, the apples that live for months in fridges normally, they went bad in the little bin in my fridge. They became science projects because I completely forgot they were there. And when I saw them, I was thinking, okay, there's a difference. But I will also say this, because of the lipedema, there's so much inflammation. There's so much fluid. If you're diagnosed with stage 3 or stage 4, which I was, there was a component of lymphedema that came because of the lipedema. So you're retaining a lot of fluid in your body. So I began to get manual lymphatic drainage massage by a physical therapist and getting wrapping. And then I graduated to ferro wraps or what have you. In that first month, I lost 14 pounds. And I know that was just pure water. Because at that point, I did start going low carb, but I didn't really shift into keto. Like I said, it took some months before I actually was at a low level keto. And then I went to a funeral and ate some fried chicken one day and I was right back out of ketosis. Literally after I thought I was doing so good. And it took me a while to get back in.
Well, fried chicken, I can understand the appeal.
Yeah.
I just wanted to go back quickly because I think it's quite an interesting point as to how people discover that they have lipedema. And it's one of the reasons why, I find it interesting. And, this is what the podcast is about, is listening to people's extraordinary stories. But I think it's particularly important with something like lipedema, which is so often just goes undiagnosed for ages, that the more women know about it, the more they can start to suspect that they might have it and advocate for their own diagnosis and drive that themselves. But I thought it was interesting that the person who suggested to you that you might have it was at the gym and was with this particular program that was for cancer patients. And it made me think that they probably often see lymphedema with cancer patients, because it's very common, isn't it, to have a lymphedema after cancer. So I was just kind of making that link there, that again, it's people who are just used to seeing these things. It's like the doctor you mentioned way back when, asking you, have your legs always been this size? Well, they obviously had it in their mind because they'd seen somebody else or they'd read something or whatever it is. So, that's why it's so important, isn't it? Just to get the information out there. But it just struck me that was a very fortuitous meeting there at the gym with somebody who'd seen cases of lymphedema, which maybe struck something in their mind to say, maybe, lipedema.
Well, something that I found fascinating is that she was a physical therapist. And what I've learned I've seen that several other physical therapists a lot of physical therapists are taught about lipedema,
right.
But doctors are not.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, I went back originally to her for physical therapy, but she knows lymphedema. She doesn't really know physical therapy for lipedema, which I found out the one day I went to her. So I had to switch. Now I have to drive literally about 45, 50 minutes to get to the one therapist that I know that knows how to actually provide care for lipedema patients with lipedema as well as the lymphedema component of it. It's definitely shown great results, but it's really frustrating for the person that just doesn't understand why. Because it's this combination that's the problem. First of all, you don't know you have lipedema. You don't know that there's so much abnormal fat that is on your body, that sick fat or however you want to call it. It will not respond to diet or exercise. It just is not going anywhere. And so many people, very physically active, even though very heavy, which is story of my life, and you think, okay, I'm doing all this working out. Then you have the carb addiction, the sugar addiction, which I did not know until it was gone, just how bad it was. I did not realize the cravings were because of carbs. I did not know that just tasting something sweet triggers leptin, the hunger hormone, and causes you to want to eat. Even if it doesn't have to be sugar. It could be like, I like monk fruit sweetener. I use that with my little treat that I have. But these things do affect how well you handle your hunger. Number one. And number two, that sugar addiction. When we were in the master class, there was a YouTube video. It's actually also on YouTube. I think it's called The Truth About Sugar.
Truth About Sugar. Yeah, yeah.
The Truth About Sugar, I believe yes, that's what it's called. The Truth About Sugar. Mm-hmm. And it's a documentary that I think was done by the BBC. And it really goes into detail about just how addictive the sugar is, and even how big food companies have exploited sugar with all of these packaged processed foods, doing everything that they can to make sure that the food will taste just perfect, which means even stuff that isn't supposed to be sweet. It could be a salty something or other. And you start reading the ingredients, it's like, why is it all these maltodextrose? I mean, there's like 20 something, I don't know how many different names there are for sugar. It's just sugar, high fructose corn syrup. Why would that be in something that's a salty thing or what have you? Well, what they found is if they don't have that sugar in it to begin with, because they so poisonally, if that's a word, process the foods, they have to find a way to make the poison taste good. So they start by adding as much sugar as they can, just enough to get you addicted, and then find out, okay, what makes it just taste where it can just taste perfect, or it tastes like the real thing,
It's that combination. I can remember it might have even been the same documentary, but it was something that I was watching. It was a program I was watching. Maybe it was that one where they were talking about the perfect balance between sugar, salt, and fat. They actually imaged people's brains, thinking about certain types of food and which areas would light up. It's why when we go on a calorie restrictive diet, our brains often conjure images of these highly processed foods that have a lot of fat, sugar, salt in them, because it's energy dense. That is what our body's saying it wants, because it thinks we're trying to starve it.
Exactly.
And they're addictive, so it lights up all those centers in your brain that just wants more. And it explains why it's so difficult to resist. It explains why we have cravings for these things.
Yeah, and when you start looking at how we were taught, we're taught that saturated fat is what causes high cholesterol, which causes heart attacks and all of these different things. But then when you find out how the studies were conducted, you're filling out a survey. How many cups of ribs do you eat in a week? Mm-hmm. And then you decide to deduct or exclude countries that don't fit what you want your hypothesis to turn out to look like.
That's right.
And then you go one step further for anybody who challenges what you say, you have them blackballed and what have you. Next thing you know, you have a generation of people who have come up. The food pyramid got flipped. And ever since then, obesity, childhood obesity out of control, diabetes out of control, heart disease out of control. All of these things are out of control. And nobody wants to look at, well, where did this start? And so when I started watching these things, and I started watching so many of these programs, they'll show graphs. This is what things look like from the 1800s to 1970. There's a flat curve. We talk about COVID. You got these curves now, and that's what you see. You see not a curve. You never saw a curve. All you see is the skyrocketing rate of heart disease, diabetes, obesity through the roof. And not only is it not getting better, now the childhood obesity has gone through the roof as well. So you have to ask yourself, what went wrong? And then what is the solution? Now, I can't speak for everyone because I believe everyone is different. You have to find what works best for you. But I'm keto for life. I can't see me going any other way. Within less than a couple of weeks of being on keto, the pain that I would have in my ankles and my legs that would be really severe because of the lipedema all but disappeared. There is a little pain there when there is some extra swelling going on but I mean, compared to a 7 and 8 on the scale of 1 to 10, it's down to 1 to 2. That's a drastic difference. That's a drastic difference. And even my physical therapist, because I look at how my legs they're really super squishy. They're really squishy. And when I make comments about them, she's like, but you have to see what they look like before.
Right, yeah.
And then she would talk about how even the way she measures it, she won't stop going for a while and just recently started going back after they allowed the non-elective procedures. And she even had to measure it in different spots because the spot that is bigger now has changed. It's not where it used to be. My sister came to visit. She's in town from Phoenix. And she kept asking me, how much do you weigh? And I'm like, none of your business. You know, if you want to ask the right question, ask how much have you lost? And it's somewhere around 90 pounds. And because I lost it, I'm going through the process. I may not see it as clearly as someone who hasn't seen me in a while, which she hadn't seen me in several months. And she said, oh my gosh, you are so small. I'm thinking, I'm small? And then I go in front of her to get a plate or something, and she starts grabbing my butt, talking about, whose butt is this? What happened to your butt? This is not your... So that was less invasive and more encouraging. Even though she was grabbing my butt, it was like, okay, at least she's acknowledging that it's small in the grab, so I guess I can live with it. But yeah, it's been a fascinating journey for me. It started, let me see. I was officially diagnosed in December of 2018. I couldn't get into physical therapy, and everything started at the same time until March of 2019. And that's when I started low carb in 2019. I was trying to lose weight for 2 months, January and February. I lost a total of 6 pounds in 2 months. Trying to lose it on my own without going low carb. And it was very frustrating. I was very frustrated because no matter what, I was always starving. And I'm not eating that much, of course, because I'm trying to lose weight. In 2 months, I'll lose 6 pounds. I'm thinking at this rate, it'll take me until the apocalypse is come and gone. This will be pre-apocalypse days, you know. Pre-COVID days.
I was going to say, don't tempt fate.
Okay, well, yeah. These are pre-COVID days. These are pre-COVID days. But I'm like, man, this is ridiculous. And that was January and February. In March, I started going low carb and getting wrapped and getting the manual lymphatic drainage massage. And in 1 month, I lost 14 pounds.
Big difference.
And so within that first 6 month period, there was a major weight drop. And I still have quite a bit of weight to lose. But a few months back, I elected to stop trying to really reduce a lot more. When I learned that your body, when you gain so much weight, whatever your maximum weight is, your body adjusts itself to that weight, and your body is always wanting to stay at that weight. So I want to reset my metabolism to where I am now so that when I do lose weight again, if my body decides, well, I think you should be at this higher, 90 pounds higher weight, instead of it going there, I want my metabolism to kind of be reset to where it is now. It's very easy for me to maintain the weight that I am now. And it's not difficult for me to say, okay, when I'm ready to, I want to go ahead and start losing some more weight. And I know exactly the prescription to do it. I know, I've got quite a few biohacks in my toolbox now. And so that's exciting to me to know that I have control. I have complete authority over my weight. Even though the lipedema fat may not go anywhere, I know that I can control the rest of it. My labs, my PCP, I've been having them check my cholesterol. And at one point early on in keto, which is typical, it went way up. And they became a little concerned about it. This was before I changed PCPs. This was before I found my wonderful new PCP. And PCP, the primary care physician, by the time I got to see her, it was 2 months later, I asked her to do it again. I was losing a lot of weight really fast when the first one was done. And then what I learned from the second one, she went through all the labs and she responded via messaging. This is improved. This is improved. Overall, everything is wonderful. Keep doing what you're doing. I definitely did the dense LDL particles, which are the particles that do cause your arteries to get plaque buildup on them. Those plummeted. But then what I learned is as you're actually losing weight, those fat cells are releasing all of that cholesterol into the bloodstream. So your labs will show higher cholesterol. I learned that from, I don't know I think you interviewed her, Megan Pfeffer.
Oh, Megan, right.
The Australian lady. Yes, that one. She's the one that taught me that. And sure enough, as I started looking more into it, initially I'm thinking, I don't think she knows what she's talking about. Then down the road, I was like, aha, maybe she does. So yeah, she knows what she's talking about.
So I'm interested what you say, and I think it's good anyway to have periods of maintenance. I know people freak out about it, and it's not maintenance to them. It's a stall. It's a
plateau.
It's an obstacle in their weight loss journey. But I like to think of it as your body just taking a rest for a while.
Yeah.
Having this period of maintenance. And actually, so many of us have always been either gaining or losing weight. We're really unfamiliar with that. Just staying the same.
Yes.
Maintenance.
Yeah.
So it's a good thing, I think, to get some practice in, because that's ultimately where we're wanting to end up, right? Everyone thinks about the losing weight, but you think about when you get there, what you're going to have to do when you get there is just maintain that. So I think having periods along the way that you do that is a good thing. But I was interested in what you were saying. It sounds like you have a slightly different approach to keto, whether you're actively trying to lose weight or whether you're maintaining. You said you had some hacks, and you said you know what you've got to do. So I'd just be interested in the difference. It sounds like it's probably similar to to what goes on with me, but your maintenance keto looks different from your weight loss keto. I'd just be interested to hear a bit more about that.
Well, so my maintenance keto, I'm a lot less disciplined. Now, I do the intermittent fasting, but I like how Leslie and Keith, I think you interviewed her not long ago. She doesn't even describe it as that. She says you eat when you're hungry, basically. I ditched the breakfast. I stopped eating breakfast. So I only do the 2 meals. And then the question becomes, do you do 16 by 8 or 18 by 6? Do you have the 8-hour window or the 6-hour window? For me, it's usually around an 8-hour window, but that 16-hour is variable because my sleep habits are so weird. And actually, one of the challenges I'm having now is because my thyroid medicine needs to be adjusted. So that's kind of playing a little bit funky. It's causing sleep issues, which causes eat issues. Because if you're not getting enough sleep, which that's a big one for me, one of the patterns, and I didn't share this with you, when I started weighing and measuring my food, I started tracking everything. And I think his name is Dave Feldman. He talks about the N=1 experiment. I didn't realize I was doing that with myself. I track everything on a daily basis. I weigh myself every day. I measure everything that crosses my lips, even though I'm not as disciplined right now because I'm not trying to lose any more weight. I know what I'm doing. That helps me so that when I'm ready to go back to saying, okay, I'm ready to start trying to shed some more pounds, I know that stop snacking. For example, that's one of the big ones with me. Sometimes I won't eat until I'm full, and then 2 hours later or an hour and a half, I'm eating the pork rinds, or I'm still eating keto foods. I don't do keto cheats like a lot of people do. I do have a sweet treat. It's a chocolate mousse that I make, and I literally eat it every day. That's my dessert. Instead of eating it as a snack, I eat it as a dessert. That's how I'm supposed to do it anyway. And I nurse on it because, and there was somebody had a YouTube video and they were saying that sometimes people don't realize it's like their body and brain hasn't connected, that they're satiated. And so this lady said, so I tend to like to sip on tea or something, and it takes about 20 minutes. And that's how long it takes before my brain and body triggers that, okay, you're content. Well, I've noticed that with my chocolate mousse because I can literally nurse it really slowly. Sometimes it can take me 45 minutes to finish eating my little, I was going to call it a dose, my little portion of the my chocolate mousse. But I've noticed when I finish it, I can go 7 hours without thinking about food after that. So I do know that there is something to that. So I do apply this whole N=1 to myself. Like, that's my norm. And that's the reason why I say I have the biohacks. So I know to stop snacking in between meals, which I'm doing right now because it's just not that deep because I'm not trying to lose weight. Another thing is I've added more sweetener to certain things, and I know that that's playing a part in it, but it's okay because I'm not trying to lose weight. When I get back to, okay, I want to lose weight, or when the inflammation gets too bad and too painful, then I know, go back to your chronometer or whatever your app is to find out what were you eating when you weren't swelling before. So I do know that I have various different things that I can tweak, and then I'll start losing weight again. And I noticed that because over the last, I think it was it last week, all of a sudden I hit another all-time low. And when I call what my weight is, I go by that all-time low because I have that water weight gain fluctuation. It's like a 4 to 5 pound water. So there's always that 5 pound variable. And today, as an example, I was 0.8 tenths of a pound lighter than I was yesterday when I woke up. Then after I did the pneumatic pump on my legs, the compression pump on my legs, I was another pound lighter. I had lost another pound just by doing that. And so, and that's what I do. I weigh myself before I get in the pump. I weigh myself after I get in the pump. And then I can see, and that tells me how inflamed I am as well. So these are little tips and tricks. And because I'm documenting so much stuff, it's easy for me to be able to go back and track and trace what worked, what didn't,
That's right.
what fixes it. But the intermittent fasting is huge. That's really, really huge. I test my ketones and my blood glucose. I've started looking at the GKI, the glucose ketone index, and which I like that even better because it really shows the correlation of how the two work together to really show you how deep of the ketosis you're really in. It's pleasant to know that I can jump in and out of ketosis, which I tend to do, of course, after I've had 2 meals. When I wake up, the dawn effect, I'm going to have much lower ketones. But then if I don't eat all I have to do is wait 2 or 3 hours and the ketone levels will go right back up. So I know I'm in ketosis because I tested. So I'm just kind of a little experimenter on myself.
You're a bit of a data junkie.
Yeah, that would be a good description. Yeah. In everything in life, I can tend to do that.
Yeah, it's very useful, like you say. I mean, I would like it if somebody else would do it for me, but I can't really be bothered with it. But there are some things that I measure, and mostly when it comes to food, I just know how much is in different things roughly, and I know what's going to happen when I have too many of the keto treat type things. If I've been making things with a lot of dairy or a lot of nuts, things like that. If I actually measured it, I'd probably see, you're going over your carb allowance. But I know it, and I know what happens. I know how it makes my body feel. I know what it does to my ketones and all the rest of it. But yeah, I think I'm similar to you. I can maintain doing a lot of those things, having some of those treats, things like that. Or if I want to lose, I have to do the same thing. I have to tighten everything up, get a lot stricter, bring in some fasting. And those are the kind of things I'm doing at the moment. But yeah, it's a balance, isn't it? And
it really is.
People who don't know what it's like to really, I guess, have addictive tendencies towards food is that it is a legitimate choice that you make. Either I want to have some of the foods that I enjoy. I mean, that's the good thing about keto. The base level is it's an enjoyable way to eat. But then there are those things that will slow down weight loss, maybe even lead to weight gain, that you enjoy and you want to have. And it is a choice. Some people who are just have that kind of focus say, well, don't have any of those things. If you want to lose weight, this is what you've got to do. It's simple. But actually that choice isn't always that simple. And I think it is a legitimate choice to make, to say, actually, I'm happy to just maintain my weight loss for a while and enjoy some of these foods and to have those as part of my diet and to experience that, and then maybe have a period where I'm stricter and lose a bit more weight and then have that period of maintenance. And like I said before, it's all training for the end goal when you're there anyway, isn't it?
Absolutely. And it's funny that you say that, because when I look at how I perceive things, I think if I had not decided, let me slow down and maintain for a while, it could have caused a burnout.
That's another problem. And you flip into just dropping keto altogether.
Well, and so many people have. I remember meeting a lady a couple months ago, and the one thing that she said, we were both talking about keto and low carb, and she said that her family, they're all pretty much kind of low carb. They did keto for a while, she said, but never go off of it, because the minute I went off of it, I gained weight. And I was thinking, well, why did you go off of it? And you hear all the time that it's not sustainable. For me, it's the most sustainable thing. The only way that it will not be sustainable is if you can't get access to meat. You know, how else would it be unsustainable? You mentioned dairy. Now, I would not go on keto if I have to give up dairy. I'm sorry. That's just, and I do know that there are some things.
That's where you draw the line.
Oh, no. Yeah, that's it. That's it right there. Yep. It's like that was the line in the sand, like you said. But I don't ever want to get to the point. I have to rewind talking about the yo-yo dieting, because I've been dieting ever since, let's see, I think I was 12 years old when I joined Weight Watchers with my mom. I remember we were at the basement of some church or school or something, laying on the floor, kicking our legs in the air, all kinds of ways or what have you, you know, trying to burn those calories. But the biggest weight loss, I had lost 100 pounds before on a low carb diet, but to do not a low carb, low fat diet. But the difference was I had to have a little help. So I was taking phentermine, which is the thin part of fen-phens. Remember when fen-phens were out? They put me on phentermine. My doctor did. And so because I was on phentermine, I lost a lot of weight living on lean cuisines. Then the doctor retired and I had no more access to phentermine. The appetite came back, because the appetite wasn't going to go anywhere, because I'm still eating the fruit. I'm still eating, I was still eating lean cuisines, but.
Oh God, I remember lean cuisines.
Oh man.
A friend of mine did pretty much live on them, actually.
I did.
She was always on a diet, and she just had a freezer full of lean cuisines. And yeah, I can't remember what she had to say. She had something else for breakfast. And then, she'd eat 2 lean cuisines a day. It was someone I used to work for. And so at lunchtime, I used to sometimes get a lean cuisine as well. They were just, I
had them for breakfast, lunch, and dinner every day for a year. That's all I ate was lean cuisines. And in that year, I lost 100 pounds.
Fun times.
Yeah. But it was funny. Once the phentermine was gone, and then I remember there was the Metabolife. So I did that to replace it. Metabolife wasn't quite as good. And of course, then I started working out. And what happened, and this was the big challenge, when I lost that weight, I lost all my muscle mass. And I had a lot of muscle mass to lose. And to this day, I have problems because of all the muscle mass that I've lost. And it's like, how do you get it back? And I'm sure had I not lost that muscle mass then, even though my legs were as big as they were, they would have never felt as heavy, because I was extremely muscular in my thighs and legs. Right, yeah. And now they're like hollow where there used to be this huge muscle mass. Now that I've lost this weight, I can just see all of this clump, the lipedema squishiness. But I can see that my whole shape changed when I lost the weight. That was the first time I could buy a suit, a pant and a top, and fit them both. But that's because I lost all my muscle mass, which most of it was in the lower half of my body. The beautiful thing about keto is you don't have to worry about losing muscle mass like that. That was the one thing that was beautiful. The other beautiful thing is once you overcome the brainwashing of not being able to eat fat and falling in love with fat all over again, you learn that, in my case, for example, another trick for me, when I really want to lose weight, I need to get my fat intake up to 80%. Because when I get my fat up that high, I literally start losing a lot. When I maintain it that high, I lose a lot of weight really quick. And I believe part of that is because I get satiated so much quicker. I believe that's why. But everybody can't do that. Some people eat 80% fat and then they'll grow.
Yeah, I find it very interesting, especially when it comes to the fat versus protein question. I find it very interesting how some people respond better to higher protein and dropping their fat a little. Yeah. And where other people completely the reverse. And you're absolutely right. It completely depends on the individual. And there's no point telling everybody that this is the way you should do it.
Absolutely.
Because it's not going to work like that. You might hit on the person that the more protein, less fat is right for them. But you might hit on the person that the complete opposite is true. So that's where it's so important, isn't it? To just play around with things yourself and really get to know your body and what works for you and go with that.
And remember, I said myeloma, you have rogue protein cells. I always fought to get enough protein. That was always a challenge for me. And sometimes literally even now, I remember one time I literally ate like almost a pound of, what was it? I had fried wild caught salmon. It was like my body was just craving it. And after I ate it, I felt like $1,000,000. And that's how I knew, okay, my body really needed this. Even though I don't have the myeloma cells anymore, I've gotten really territorial about giving up my proteins. But on the flip side of that, I don't know if Leslie had mentioned that whole process called gluconeogenesis.
Gluconeogenesis, yeah.
Yeah, where if you eat a certain amount of protein, your body's going to start converting some of that to carbs. And I've noticed that I have to watch that as well. So it's like finding that perfect balance of how much protein is right for you.
Yeah, again, that seems to really vary. Some people that doesn't seem to have any impact at all. It's this whole supply versus demand question, isn't it? But again, yeah, it's very, very interesting how it's so important to just figure it out for yourself. And as you said, the N=1. Always the most important thing.
Oh, yeah.
Well, it's been fantastic talking to you today. Lots of stories. You told me you had lots of stories to tell, and you certainly fulfilled your side of the bargain. I didn't warn you about this before we started, so I am blindsiding you with it. But I always ask my guests to leave us with a top tip.
Yeah, you are blindsiding me. A top tip. See, you made me make my chair squeak. That was your problem. Your fault, Sharon. Top tip. Well, my top tip would be to anybody for anything in life is you do you. Simple as that. You do you. When it comes to keto or what works best for your body, you do you. You find out what works best for you. You don't have to be pressured by, oh, it has to be these macros or you can't eat this much. You have to do you. Find out what works for you and work what works. That's my top tip.
Perfect.
Second top tip, ditch the carbs. Yeah.
Ditch the carbs, yes. So, thank you very much, Nobuhle. See, I'm practicing. I'm practicing.
You are such the African. I tell you, you're a Zulu woman. You just have a little pigment issue. But you're definitely Zulu.
Maybe it goes back to there's something that was infused in me between the ages of about 2 and 4. I did actually live in the Gambia and spent a lot of time, especially with a woman who used to work for us. I don't think she was supposed to look after me. I don't think that was actually part of her job remit, but I apparently just adored her and spent as much time as I possibly could with her. So maybe I just infused some of that. Yes. Sadly, those memories I just don't have. Although I think there's something very deep inside
there's something that it actually was implanted in your spirit.
Yeah, there's something that I feel her memory, if you know what I mean. I can't picture her. But there's something, there's a great loss, when we left, because it was my father as a civil engineer, and so he had placements in different places, and that's why we lived there. We lived in the Gambia for those couple of years, and when we left, they didn't tell me that we weren't going back, so they didn't tell me that I would never see Ida again, and that was obviously a massive, massive trauma because apparently I wouldn't speak to anybody apart from my mother and any black person I saw. Any. So I I would be in the supermarket. I would just go running up to someone and start having a conversation with it. So there was this yearning, there was this loss. You'd taken me away from what was normal, and the people that I'd really found a connection with. And so I just went through this process and refused to speak to anyone for 6 months, apart from my mother, the postman, and anyone else who was the right colour. And I only broke it when I remember we were on holiday and going up and down in Yorkshire, and there was access to some of the beaches. You had to go down cliffs, and there was a very steep path, and there was a rope, and it was difficult, and I needed help, and my uncle refused to help me until I spoke to him. So that's when I broke my silence. But it often does come to me. Exactly. That sort of sadness sometimes really washes over me. So I think I really feel her loss. But anyway, that's a bit of a personal sidetrack we've gone on there. So you never know. Maybe maybe that love for the language was infused.
Yeah, we need to get you an African name, because you really do. You just say that. I'm so glad this is recorded, because none of my people in Africa will believe how wonderfully you pronounce my name after so many people have annihilated it.
Well, that's a great honor. Thank you very much. And it's been such a great pleasure talking to you today. Thank you so much for sharing your time.
Thank you so much for having me. It was my pleasure.
To get the resources and links from this show, please go to ketowomanpodcast.com/episodes. Please share this podcast with as many people as possible by sharing one of my links or just taking a screenshot of an episode that you enjoyed. Reviews really help raise the profile of the podcast, which gets it in front of more people, but also helps me attract a wide variety of guests. So please take a minute to leave a review on whichever podcast app or platform you like to listen on. It doesn't go unnoticed by me, the people who regularly like, share and comment on my posts. Your support really does mean the world to me. Thank you. Are you enjoying this podcast? Help me make more episodes and videos by making a pledge at my Patreon page, patreon.com/KetoWoman. Or simply hit the support button on the Keto Woman Podcast website. Don't forget to join in the fun on the Keto Woman Podcast Instagram and Facebook pages, and Daisy_Keto Woman on Twitter. Are you my next extraordinary woman? Maybe you've got an idea for a show, a topic you would like to hear about. Let me know how I can tickle your earbuds by dropping me a line at daisy@ketowomanpodcast.com. This week's end quote is a Zulu proverb. Umuntu mamuntu mabantu. I hope I got that almost right. What it means is, a person is only a person through other people. Bye-bye, Keto Lovelies.